connection available. Okay, we are live. Hello everybody. I'm here with Brother K, and would you be able to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, I'm Brother K, the founder of Bloodstained Men. We protest against circumcision in 60 cities a year from coast to coast, and we are determined to protect American boys from this cruel genital mutilation.
Can you give us a brief history of what made you interested in this topic and why you started to protest?
Well, I came of age during the Vietnam War and Civil Rights era when people were protesting the war, civil rights for everyone, and the draft, the Vietnam War, the draft, women's rights, gay rights. And around the mid-70s, I started wondering why was there no protests against circumcision. I had read a few things about it at that point, and it just puzzled me. Just having a curious mind, I couldn't figure out why are people organizing protests against everything except circumcision, which is, to a thoughtful person, it's just so clearly a brutal, blatant violation of human rights of a boy and then the man he will become of his human rights. And after a few years of talking that over with my dear friend Carol Babiak, I realized that if no one else was going to do it, we would have to do our part. So in 1979, we spent the summer at University of California, Santa Barbara, doing research, and what we discovered just appalled us. You've all heard that when you go down that rabbit hole, it just gets deeper and deeper and deeper.
Absolutely.
And so I wrote a manuscript based on that research called The Circumcision Instinct, and spent the winter and spring of 1979, 1980 writing that. In late spring of 1980, we printed up 100 copies of that and went around. We had now moved up to Northern California, went around to all the professors at Humboldt State University in Arcata, California, and gave them copies of this manuscript. A few paid our cost for it. I think it was $3 at the time. But as word spread around the academic community there that we were going around, we go into prep. We did this for about a week. We'd go into professors' offices when they held their office hours. We'd catch them in their offices, and one professor or another would say, "Oh, we heard about you all. You've got the whole campus buzzing about it." So after that successful action, we went to a local supermarket, the Co-op, the Arcata Co-op, which is very popular, and had printed out. We couldn't afford to print out that more books, but we printed out a one-page summary of our research and stood at the entrance to the Co-op, handing out our information. A lot of people took it.
Oh, good.
And yeah, hundreds of people took it. And I believe someone may have even suggested you should protest this. But at any rate, out of that came our decision that we did have to reach a wider audience. We had to protest it. So a few weeks later, we formed a citizens group. We called ourselves CARV, C-A-R-V, for Citizens Against Ritual Violence. And what they're doing to boys in American hospitals is ritual violence. It's not medicine. They strap you down and they cut off part of your genitals, and it's an ancient sacrifice. It's a ritual sacrifice. They can call it medicine all they want. Calling something medicine doesn't make it medicine.
Absolutely. I agree.
So we protested. We protested in Eureka, California at the county hospital, general hospital, at the county courthouse. We gained some notoriety through the media there in Humboldt County, and got a letter from the Sacramento Bee saying they would like to interview us. So this was me and, like I said, my dear friend Carol Babiak. So we drove to Sacramento and protested at the state capitol. We got the permit that you needed at the time, and again caused a sensation in the local media. The ABC Nightly News picked up the story. Associated Press reported the story. We drove to San Francisco the next day and protested there on Van Ness. Got a lot more media coverage. We were interviewed by KGO Radio at the time. It was a real powerhouse. It may still be, I don't know. but KCBS interviewed us. Fox, Fox 2, I believe it was. Yeah, it wasn't Fox at the time. Channel 2, big station in the Bay Area. So we really got the word out with our protests. We worked for about the next 5 years with other intactivists around the nation. We weren't called intactivists at the time, but we were in touch with Marilyn Milos and Rosemary Romberg, John Erickson, other people, and then we raised our family. We had a daughter in 1981, and we homeschooled her. And
Great.
very proud she got her PhD at Cornell University in 2014.
Very nice.
And she now has a very successful career as a independent scholar.
Oh, great.
And getting publications and building her reputation.
Wonderful.
So that brings us to the year 2012. I had followed the intactivist movement in the newspaper, in the media all those years, but wasn't an active part of it in the 90s and the double O's, the early 2000s. But in 2012, in fact, I didn't know about the intactivist movement on Facebook. I thought Facebook was just like a thing for college kids. I had no idea that there was I just knew what I saw in the newspapers.
Right.
But in 2012, as many of you know, the American Academy of Pediatrics came out with an insane policy statement issued by a committee that was stacked with people who had a religious conflict of interest. That's just a blatant conflict of interest to come from a cultural background that requires you to circumcise your sons, and then they stacked that 2012 committee with people of that background. But I didn't know that at the time. I've learned all this subsequent. But what I did know was that it was just a preposterous and cruel statement for them to make. And I saw the reports in the newspaper, and seeing the comments at the bottom of one or more articles, I first learned that there was a Facebook community opposed to American circumcision. And so obviously I quickly made a Facebook account. That would have been in the summer, I believe it was late July, early August of 2012. And that's where my current work started.
Great. So why do you refer to yourself as an inactivist as opposed to an activist?
An intactivist.
Intactivist.
When I first heard the word intactivist, I didn't totally get on board with the word itself. It's like any other coined term, it takes a little getting used to, but it does have, it's sort of a code for people who are working against circumcision. It's a combination of the words intact and activist. An intact activist, intactivist. Like I said, it took me a little getting used to, but it's code, and when you say you're an intactivist, the goal is for everyone someday to understand what you mean, and many people do already know what an intactivist is.
I like it. So up until recently, I believe, I was like most Americans. I thought that circumcision was normal or even medically beneficial, and that it was just something that everyone just did. I mean, it wasn't until I read Dr. Suzanne Humphreys, and she's an MD. She has a book called Rising from the Dead, where she described the first time she witnessed a circumcision, and she described it as the most traumatic psychological experience, both for the infant and for herself.
Wow.
She said the baby cried himself into a huge blue spasm, and to this day, this infuriates her.
Into a huge blue spasm.
And she takes every opportunity possible to educate parents beforehand on the function of the foreskin, and she recommends a movie called Cut. And she advises parents to watch a medical circumcision video before going ahead with it. So let me ask you, what is the function of the foreskin?
The foreskin on a man and on the baby is the analogous to the clitoral hood on a woman, on the female child, and on the woman she grows to be. The glands of the penis is equivalent to the clitoris. And so both the glands of the penis, the head of the penis, and the clitoris have a hood or a covering. In the woman, it's called the clitoral hood. In the man, it's called the foreskin. Okay. It's the same thing. It's the structural and functional equivalent. When you cut that, and women get it when you say, could you imagine living without the hood of your clitoris? And they go, oh my God, no.
Right.
And yes, and you don't have to explain that to a woman. They get it.
Right.
But men who have been circumcised at birth have no idea of exactly the damage that was done to their body, to their sexuality, and to their body, to their sense of well-being, to their inner well-being. They have been forced to live in a state of discomfort that becomes the norm for them. And that's one of the reasons why it's so difficult to break through the barrier of denial in some men, because once you realize what's missing there, you do become aware of that background discomfort that you've been forced to live with. When you cut off the foreskin of a baby, the man he becomes, you are altering the fundamental nature of the human genitals. The glands of the penis is meant to be an internal organ, just like the clitoris. When you cut off the foreskin, it dries out and it becomes keratinized, which is a type of scarring, so that the head of the penis actually has a thin layer of scar tissue, which we call keratin, in all men who are circumcised. That is just a physiological fact. And clearly that will affect not only your sensitivity, but your ability to experience pleasure. More than that, the foreskin itself has the 5 most erogenous zones on the male penis. When you cut that off, you have deprived a man of the most erogenous parts of his penis. And curiously enough, the most sensitive place left on the circumcised penis is the circumcision scar. If you Google Morris Sorrells, Sorrells, and the fine touch study of the circumcised versus the non-circumcised penis, you Google it, that you should bring up that study, which is published a few years back. And you can find the information. You can find the citation for the information I just gave you.
Thank you. Okay, you often post links to medical circumcision videos for parents to watch. What are people's typical reactions after watching one?
Some people actually refuse to watch a video because they know.
Me.
Well, yeah. Some people don't need to watch it. They just imagine it is enough for them. But there are other people who want to circumcise, and so they refuse to watch it. They prefer to just imagine it. It's whatever. I don't even know what because they usually block you or they delete their posts or they go into silence. But when you watch a circumcision video, you are seeing the full horror of genital torture, the genital torture of a human being. If you wanted to injure a child, injure a baby, and injure the man-to-be's sexuality, there is nothing you could do that would be worse than infant circumcision, that allows him to still pee and reproduce. Infant circumcision is absolutely the most destructive and barbaric injury you can inflict on a human being.
That's a powerful statement. Are there any ethical concerns about circumcision? Can circumcision be viewed as a violation of human rights?
Absolutely. And we are stressing and emphasizing the similarity between the barbaric violation of female circumcision and male circumcision. The World Human Rights Community has often focused on the most severe form of female circumcision to rally support against female circumcision, but they've ignored male circumcision and ignored the fact that 95% of female circumcision is the equivalent of male circumcision or less in severity. All of them are wrong, but the average female circumcision is cutting a piece of the clitoral hood off, not the entire clitoral hood, although that also is done. It's widely practiced in Indonesia among the population there that has a religious reason, the Middle Eastern religion that the Indonesian people share. They circumcise boys and girls. They don't, and they call it the same thing. They don't differentiate. So it's a huge, blatant violation of human rights, and it is definitely the human rights issue of our age, of our era, of our generations, of the 21st century. There is no greater human rights violation than the circumcision of boys and girls around the world. And so while I focus on American circumcision, I do believe that when the day comes when the American people have acknowledged the injury of male circumcision and protected our boys from it, that the American people will then again be involved in the worldwide movement to protect all children, boys and girls, from genital mutilation, because it is a worldwide problem and just absolutely barbaric. And you can see those videos on YouTube of the circumcision of boys or the circumcision of girls. The cruelty just takes your breath away and can make you just doubt that human life even has any worth, that human beings are just...
Wow.
But what I always say to people when they make that kind of cynical comment, because I mean, I felt those things too, is that there are people working to stop it. And I'm very proud to be one of them. And I'm very proud of you, Suzanne, for being one of them.
Thank you.
And all of you watching this, and so many of my friends and people around the world. Denmark has just passed a resolution, a people's resolution with 50,000 signatures. It's a special parliamentary resolution. It will now force the Parliament of Denmark to debate the genital mutilation of boys. They have already protected girls by law from genital mutilation. It's time that the world recognize that the genital mutilation of boys is just as severe and just a cruel violation of human rights as that of girls. And it's happening. Iceland is currently has a bill in the works to protect boys. They've protected girls. So it's a worldwide movement to protect all children from genital mutilation. My emphasis here in the United States is clearly American boys, because this is where I can be most effective and be on the streets protesting. And it's working. The word is getting out. More and more American parents are leaving their sons intact. And even parents who fell into the trap, because it's a very cunning trap that American doctors have laid. And I don't know if we'll get into the history of circumcision here today or not, but it was not accidental what American doctors did to the American people.
Well, that makes me wonder, how did circumcision become popular in the USA? What is just a brief history?
Well, believe it or not, and this is all documented in the medical literature, it's not some sort of urban legend, American doctors in the late 19th century, around 1870, 1880, 1890, began to tell parents that they could cure a boy's masturbation problem. Parents were going to doctors saying, catch my son masturbating.
Wow.
So doctors, American doctors, and they published this in the medical journals, suggested and did circumcision on boys, to both as a punishment and as a prevention. And somehow it morphed into infant circumcision as the turn of the century came. In 1915 or 1914, I believe it was 1915 though, the Journal of the American Medical Association, to their great disgrace, called for the universal circumcision of all American boys. And it took them 50 years and they did it. But that was a powerful call in the Journal of the American Medical Association, calling for the circumcision of American boys. They did it in about 50 years.
I read that circumcision.
And let me
sorry.
just add that they no longer they had to change the cover story. They could no longer if doctors were going to be calling for the circumcision of all boys, they could no longer be saying, well, look, it's going to stop masturbation, it's going to be a sexual punishment. So they invented these preposterous medical excuses for it. So.
Right, I understand. So I read that circumcision is the only procedure where a doctor can legally amputate part of a non-consenting child without any medical reason. I was shocked to learn that circumcision is solely a cosmetic surgery and the boys receive zero medical or health benefits from the procedure. Can you explain further?
Well, circumcision has become a sacred cash cow in America. You cannot question it. Even now when we get support at medical conventions from doctors, and I say, doctor, that's such a powerful statement of condemnation. Can I get you on tape? And they go, oh, no, I can't put that on tape. And they're all afraid. The circumcision industry in the United States is very powerful. They have $1 billion industry to protect. Some people have estimated it, some authorities have estimated it at $1.5 billion, $2 billion. There's an aftermarket for infant foreskins. If you've been following news, you see that Sandra Bullock has been on the Ellen show bragging about this beauty facial that she got with penis foreskin.
Disgusting.
Beauty cream. Kate
and she's
Blanchett.
laughing.
They're laughing about it, yes. It's used for to make skin graft material for burn victims. They are just using infant foreskins. Can you imagine if they were using any part of a girl's genitals in a similar way? There would be national outrage.
Absolutely. Whenever I first met you, that was one of the first questions that I asked. I was like, why are you protesting against boys? Shouldn't it be against girls? Isn't there a difference? That's how ignorant I was.
Well, in the United States, but it's a good question, and we actually get asked it. People say, well, why aren't you protesting against girls? We don't have a problem with girl circumcision in the United States for two reasons. It's a minority practice among some immigrants to the United States, but it is criminal. Under federal law, it is criminal. And now, even as we sit here, there is a Detroit doctor who is on trial in federal court for having circumcised girls according to that culture's tradition. And I should add that that culture circumcises boys too. All cultures, all people that circumcise girls also circumcise boys. There is no girl circumcision that stands alone. The other way it does happen, there's male child circumcision without the girl circumcision, but all cultures that circumcise girls also circumcise boys. And it's a huge problem. I think that the international community that is opposing female circumcision is starting to see that they've made a tactical error in ignoring male circumcision, because they can pass all the laws they want and they can call it female genital mutilation, but it's the people are still doing it, and they call it female circumcision, or they call it circumcision, and they don't see it as any different from what they do to their boys. And in fact, it's not. And they see it firsthand. They know. They laugh at the Americans and other people who call it genital mutilation, and they're saying the same thing. What we do with our boys is much worse. Why are you people all screaming at us for what we're doing to our girls? What we do to our boys is much worse, and you're doing that to your boys in America.
Wow.
So hypocrisy has backfired on the world community that is trying to abolish female circumcision. You're not going to abolish female circumcision until you address male circumcision. The genital mutilation of all children is criminal and barbaric and traumatic, and a violation of the fundamental human right to your body, to your normal genitals.
One thing that really personally took me, if you go to your Facebook page, which is, people can find you at Brother K,
yes,
you post pictures of boys who, right before their circumcision and then right after, because parents post these pictures on Facebook and just the photos, just, I mean, you can see the look on their faces. That alone, I mean, they don't even have to watch the medical circumcision videos as far as I'm concerned. The if you look at their eyes, the horror, they look like those kids who, you know, where they take pictures in war-torn countries, you know, where they've just been bombed and the children have lost everything, and you see the immense fear, and you can just see the look of horror and terror on their faces. And then the mothers will post things like, "Oh, my little warrior child." And it's like, no, that's a newborn. That's not a warrior. That's not a warrior.
Yes,
that is a newborn.
The trauma is so obvious to anyone who has any experience in life.
Right. You just
and
look
it's these young moms who they don't have a clue. They have no idea what they're showing when they post those pictures of those traumatized babies in hopeless despair.
When you see them in succession, you see one photo after another, it is clear, it is obvious what is happening. And most people aren't clear what circumcision is. They believe it's just a little snip. And so I think you've already kind of gone over this, but how much skin is actually removed?
Well, let me say that the first step of circumcision does not involve cutting. The foreskin, the baby's foreskin is actually fused to the head of the penis, just the way in a newborn girl, the clitoral hood is fused to the clitoris. The first step in every circumcision, and it's debatable as to whether it's the single most painful part of the process or not, but it certainly is torture unparalleled in human existence. If you want to torture a human being, you would rip their foreskin loose from the glands of the penis at birth. Some babies actually pass out at that point, and that's the first shriek of agony that you hear in some of those circumcision videos. Eyewitnesses say that you can actually hear the tearing sound that that breaking of those membranes that attach the inner foreskin to the head of the penis. You can actually hear that ripping sound. It's just the cruelty. It infuriates me. I can't believe that the American people are being so stubborn and resistant to abolishing this practice ASAP. And American doctors are so guilty. They are so guilty, and so they're sort of stuck with their cover story that it has benefits. So once you rip that foreskin loose from the glands of the penis, what are you going to do? Well, you have to cut it off. There are several ways that they do it, but all involve scissors. You have to cut a slice down that foreskin, and then you either insert a bell over it, a Gomco clamp bell, or you insert this Plastabell device over it. When they put the Gomco bell over it, they actually safety pin the two ends together so they stay in place, so they can, when they pull this whole contraption through the Gomco apparatus. It is just barbaric is an understatement for what infant circumcision is. You can see when they use that tool to separate the foreskin from the glands, you can actually see that tool in the videos. You can actually see that tool, the outline of that tool under the foreskin as it plunges deep into the penis. It goes about halfway down the length of the penis, because at birth the foreskin appears to be greatly enlarged relative to the size of the penis. That's because the baby's penis will grow into that foreskin as time passes by. That foreskin has a sphincter at the tip that protects, that keeps it sealed, and it's a tightly sealed structure that lets urine out and nothing in. So once they separate it, they use scissors and cut down it, and if you measure what's taken, what an adult man has lost is the equivalent of the size of an index card or a Bloodstained Men information card. I didn't bring a Bloodstained Men information card, but it's probably about this size. It's about a 3 by 5, 15 square inches, because the foreskin is a double fold of skin. So what you see removed, there are pictures that are out there. Facebook usually removes them, but you can find pictures of a severed foreskin, but what you see in there is just half of what's actually removed, because the other half is inside that severed foreskin. You have to unfold it because it's a double fold of skin.
I'm getting wheezy just listening to this.
Yeah, I'm getting more angry as I talk about it. This issue does that to you, ladies and gentlemen.
And most people are under the impression that anesthesia is used, or any type of painkillers. What do you say about that?
Yeah, that's baloney. I've posted several doctor interviews. They brag that they don't use anesthesia because it doesn't work. 60 to 80% of all infant circumcisions performed in the United States do not use any anesthesia. They might give the baby the equivalent of a lollipop, something called Sweeties, or it's basically a sucrose sucker. And they claim that calms the baby. That's a bunch of baloney. They basically shove that Sweeties into the baby's. It's like a pacifier with sugar water in it. They shove that into the baby's mouth to gag him and keep him quiet. But there is a small number of babies who are successfully anesthetized against the anguish, the torture of circumcision, because it can be done. The reason why most doctors don't do it is because you have to wait about 20 to 30 minutes for that anesthesia to kick in. The other problem is that you have to be very careful in injecting, and that injection into the base of the baby's penis, by the way, is extraordinarily painful. The babies shriek. Babies shriek the whole, every step of the way. But they cannot inject. They have to be very cautious in how much of that anesthetic lidocaine they inject into the baby's penis at that age, because it's actually not supposed to be used on a baby's penis. The manufacturer does not recommend it for a baby's penis. When they circumcise older boys in some of these Southeast Asian nations, they're able to use an adequate amount of that, and so you'll see I'm posting a lot of photographs of those boys lying on tables being circumcised, and they appear to suffer no pain during that successful anesthesia. But they cannot anesthetize American babies against the torture, and that's why most doctors don't do it. They have a topical cream that they use, just absolutely absurd. Can you imagine a topical cream for put a topical cream on your finger and then rip off the fingernail? I mean, it's just preposterous. The torture, it's torture every step of the way.
What problems can occur after the initial surgery? Are there any complications?
What I wanted to add was, even when anesthesia does work, when it wears off, that baby, the first time he pees, he will go through hell. Because if you've ever had a raw sore wound and poured salt into it, that's what pee is. Pee is salt water poured onto a raw. The head of the penis is raw and sore and blistery red after circumcision, because you've ripped that membrane off the head of the penis. So even when a baby is anesthetized, that night his mother is going to be on Facebook saying, "Oh, little soldier got circumcised today, and now I can't get any sleep. Oh, poor me, I'm so unhappy, and my baby won't let me sleep. He just wants me to hold him." And I mean, it's just, American moms are acting like total idiots on this issue. It's embarrassing.
Absolutely.
But so yes, I just wanted to add that, because you've got these people that are going to say, "Oh, well, we got our little soldier anesthetized." They usually don't. In fact, there's a very notorious video on, and we're going to get to your next question in a minute, but I can't emphasize this enough. There's a notorious video on Facebook. Look up a neonatal circumcision, and you'll see it. It's the baby's name is Ben, and that doctor is actually circumcising his own son with his wife's help. Now, he does give the baby the anesthesia. He gives him the lidocaine injection in the base of his penis. You watch that video, and that doctor would be highly motivated not to torture his son. He gave him the lidocaine. You watch that video of baby Ben, and you will see that anesthetic did not work, and that is absolutely the most severe torture video, or it's as severe a torture video as you'll see out there on the internet. Look up on YouTube, neonatal circumcision. Put neonatal circumcision into your search bar on YouTube, and there are a couple of someone else has taken it, and because it's about I believe it's about 8 minutes. Someone is, or 10 minutes, but someone has posted an edited version that just skips his little speech with his wife in the beginning. He does not identify her as his wife, well, or him as the father of the child, but we've established in numerous times and posted about it numerous times that, and I won't mention his name here because he's always looking to get some more notoriety. Although I have heard that he's recently had to move out of state because of charges that were brought against him for the way he treated a young female baby, and he had to leave his practice there. So you can put all that together, ladies and gentlemen.
I have one question before, and then we'll return to that question.
Yeah.
What do you say about mothers who say, "Oh, my baby handled it just fine and slept through it even, didn't make a peep"?
The babies who are reported to sleep through it, I posted a video from a nurse a few years ago. They pass out from shock. You all know stories of prisoners passing out from shock and pain and trauma. No baby sleeps through circumcision. It is impossible, period. You lie any child down and you chop at their genitals, some are going to pass out from shock, and that's what's happening.
Okay.
And we cannot even begin to imagine what kind of brain damage is being done to these children.
That's been proven.
There are, if you go to Circumcision Resource Center on the internet, it's Ron Goldman, Dr. Ron Goldman's website, and he wrote the book called Circumcision, the Hidden Trauma. You go to his page and you will see several articles that he has there that demonstrate the brain damage that is occurring from the trauma to this newborn brain. It is just absolutely disgraceful what American doctors are doing to our children.
So what problems can occur after the initial surgery? Are there complications?
Yes. The most common, actually I saw this morning, UCLA has deleted a video that they posted several years ago that described some of the common complications. I just saw that this morning. That video has been deleted, and I tagged James Lowen in a comment on that. James, we're going to have to deal with that at some point. Yes, there are short-term complications, there are intermediate complications, there are long-term complications. Let's go with the short-term first. There are a number of babies who actually bleed to death. There are a number of babies who lose their penis, who lose part of their penis. There are babies who get infections. They have to be re-hospitalized. And there are no statistics. There is no reporting needed for circumcision complications. And hospitals and doctors have no incentive to report these incidents. They report them under other categories, such as infant with sepsis. They will not. They keep circumcision out of all their reports so that it stays below the radar. But we see it on Facebook every day, and that's just what I'm seeing on Facebook. That's just parents who post it on Facebook. We're just seeing, it's like the tip of an iceberg, what we're seeing on Facebook. The problem out there is
immense.
It is just absolutely disastrous. It's a crisis. It's a crisis, ladies and gentlemen. What's going on right now in American hospitals? Thousands of these babies every day are being tortured in their genitals and suffering side effects known and unknown. So in the short term, you have this catastrophic damage to the penis that the babies will refuse to breastfeed. In my own case, I refused to take any nourishment for 3 days after my circumcision. My mother thought I was going to start. I wouldn't take a bottle.
Wow.
I absolutely refused to take anything. I was not interested in any nourishment. They finally gave me goat's milk. In despair, the doctor said, try goat's milk, try goat's milk. And I went for the goat's milk. But yeah, I went 3 days without anything.
That's intense for a newborn.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I saw that was interesting is the amount of blood needed, the blood loss needed, is just a tiny amount for a newborn.
Oh yeah, it's just a. I think Dr. Mama has a shot glass that shows it's like a quarter of a shot glass.
Right.
A baby doesn't have to lose much blood to bleed to death.
Right.
And we had, again, these circumcision deaths are hushed up quickly, I might add, because the parents are paid off, and part of the settlement from the insurance company in the hospital. And I mean, these parents are getting a lot of money when their baby dies, as you can imagine. It doesn't compensate for it, but they've got a dead baby. They're not going to turn their back on $1 million hush money settlement.
Right.
But part of that settlement is that they cannot reveal it. They cannot reveal that their baby died of circumcision. That's why it's so hard to get parents to acknowledge what's happening out there. But we did have a baby die last summer. This was documented on Facebook. He bled to death after circumcision down in Texas. Can't remember his name, but I've posted that on Facebook. Many people posted notorious death, and then several days later, the parents came out and said, "Well, the hospital told us that he didn't bleed to death because of circumcision. He didn't die because of circumcision." But they were posting all, in real time as it was happening, and
right.
then suddenly,
Suddenly, the story switched.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Do all pediatricians have to learn this? I mean, who are the MDs who are doing this? What type?
2/3 of the circumcisions in the United States are done by OBGYNs in the hospital. The other third are done by pediatricians in their offices.
Okay.
But so I'm just addressing some of the short term. If you go to Stanford Medical School, you will see complications of circumcision. The Stanford Medical School website. Type in Stanford Medical School circumcision complications into Google, and you'll bring that up. All of those complications are underreported in the United States. Underreported. All of those complications happen more often and more frequently, and much more often in some cases, like meatalstenosis. That's what I call a short-term complication. These boys are developing what's a scarring around the urethral opening called the meatus. And you imagine that if you rip a membrane off the head of the penis, you're going to pull some of the head of the penis off in some cases, and that is happening. Boys are losing chunks out of it. There are men out there that think it's just normal to have craters in the head of their penis, in their glands, because when they were circumcised, the foreskin was ripped away and it pulled away chunks of the head of their penis. And more men are learning about it.
That's crazy.
They have no recourse under law. But at any rate, the distinguished researcher Morton Frisch has recently published a post. He posted about it, but it was published in Nordic Science, and the Huffington Post picked it up. If you Google Morton Frisch, Frisch, complications of circumcision, urethral damage, you'll see that meatalstenosis is actually occurring in 10 to 20% of boys and the men they become. And that's what Jimmy Kimmel never acknowledged, that his meatalstenosis came from circumcision, but it's well known that that's essentially the only cause of meatalstenosis is a newborn circumcision. Jimmy Kimmel, the entertainer on TV, recently had to undergo surgery to correct his meatalstenosis. I have friends on Facebook, Craig Adams and others, and I have friends whose sons have been afflicted with meatalstenosis. It's scarring around the P opening of the penis, and it can make for a painful urination, It can obstruct the flow of urine. And some of these boys, they're in tears, and they hide it from their moms as long as they can, and then they burst into tears and tell mom, I'm in such pain when I have to go pee. And this is happening to boys as young as 2, 3, 5, 6 years old, and they have to go through surgery to correct it. The other intermediate complication is that for one reason or another, these boys are being sent in to repair their circumcisions. We have firsthand testimony from a number of pediatric urologists that 20 to 30% of their business is doing circumcision repairs on boys.
Wow.
And
that's immense.
And that's why when I say it's $1 to $2 billion industry, and why there's not a widespread medical rebellion against it is because it's a cash cow. It's a sacred cow and a cash cow. You combine money, politics, and religion, and you've got the perfect circumcision crisis for the American people. It's ongoing even as we speak. There is no effort in the medical community to put a halt to this cruel, barbaric amputation of normal structure from the male genitals when we are babies.
Well, you spoke of money. According to Dollars and Cents, the business of circumcision wrote, if a doctor circumcised just 5 boys each week at the average rate, they can pull in over $176,000 annually, and that is if they take 2 weeks vacation. And so most people don't even make a salary. That's not even most people's salary. So
well, I saw a figure the other day of $400 for a circumcision. You see different figures for these circumcisions. You see moms bragging on the internet, on Facebook, how their son's circumcision only cost $75. I'll go to Dr. Smith, he'll do it for $125, and they're getting Medicaid to pay for it. But I saw just in the last day or two, I saw a figure from a hospital, $400. Well, if you do 5 circumcisions a week, at $400, that's $2,000 a week. If you do 50 of them a week for at that price, I believe that comes to $100,000 right there.
Wow.
I've got quotes from a friend of mine whose mother is a pediatrician. She says, she was speaking of circumcision, I'm not going to throw away an extra $75,000 a year. So it really depends upon how many circumcisions the pediatrician does or the OBGYN does and how much they charge for them. I've seen circumcisions for as much as $600 and $800, and I've seen figures even higher than that. So it's a variable, but there is no doubt about it that it can be in the high 5 figures and into the 6 figures for a doctor who wants to make extra income. This is not their regular income. This is extra income for a doctor.
So what I've also witnessed.
Let me, while we were,
ahead.
I did just want to. I don't believe I finished on the long-term complications of circumcision.
Okay, sure.
And you're asking some good questions, then, so I don't want to lose track of the earlier one. Probably the most controversial long-term effect of circumcision. Controversial because it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing for men. It's a shameful secret in American bedrooms. Is that we've got grown men who are becoming impotent at 20, 30, 40 years of age. Many of them are turning to Viagra, and there's some other drugs out there. But it's documented that Americans are consuming the greatest number of Viagra in the world. Is circumcised American men are gobbling Viagra like crazy, because circumcision, that scar over the head of their penis, that keratin, has slowly taken away what feeling they had left in the glands of their penis, and we have grown men who no longer have feeling in their penis, and so they're gobbling. And Israeli men, the same thing. I don't recall the figure right off the top of my head, but Your Whole Baby has reposted an article from the Whole Network about it on their page. Look on Google, type in the Whole Network Viagra circumcision, and you'll see the article right there. and they document it. That it's circumcised American men gobbling down the Viagra. It's so the most common long-term effect of circumcision is or a common long-term effect, because that reminds me of another one I want to talk about, is impotence, decreased sensitivity, and lack of feeling in the penis. The other thing I wanted to say about the long-term effect, and many women have testified to this, and European women have also, that a circumcised man has to adapt to what happened to him, and he has a different way of making love to a woman than an intact man, and it's what's called the jackhammer style, to create enough sensation on his penis. But the problem is that the jackhammer style, the circumcised penis has been called a pole with a hole. It's got no movable part. An intact man has a movable part that reduces the friction between a man and a woman, and in fact requires very little movement once insertion is made, and those parts, the gliding nature of the foreskin makes insertion very comfortable for the man and the woman. But with a circumcised man, that insertion can be very, very painful. Americans use lube for that reason. Europeans don't use lube, and many Europeans don't understand the jokes they see in American sitcoms about lube it up. And when they learn about the intactivist movement, the light bulb goes, oh, so that's what it is, it's circumcision. So circumcision has altered the fundamental sexual relationship between a man and his sexual partners. Devastating. And it depends on the woman. Some women are better at working around it than other women, but it's well documented by many, many women and European women that intact sex is comfortable. Circumcised sex can be and is very uncomfortable and even painful and dry without loads of lube.
Interesting. So what I've witnessed just from hanging out on your page and checking out what's going on is that oftentimes the mothers will get it, but the fathers insist that they want the boy to look like him. How do you respond to that?
That's an interesting psychological damage of circumcision. 100 years ago, most fathers were not circumcised. They were intact. No one at that time said the boy has to match the father. That was not even an issue when doctors went to circumcise the boys. It's American doctors who created that bunch of baloney. And American men have been brainwashed to think that there's something macho about making your son's penis resemble. I mean, you could shave off your pubes, Dad, and then your penis will resemble your son's. But that is absolutely a preposterous excuse. Women, girls and mothers don't compare genitals. Dads and sons don't compare genitals. American men have been brainwashed to think that that's a fatherly thing to do. It's almost like these words have been programmed into their heads. I want my son to match. It's just insane. But it creates a denial that keeps the man from acknowledging that he himself was injured, but he passes the injury on. It's really sad, and it's a disgrace to American manhood. Any man who would say, I want my son's penis to match mine, I will tell you right now, and I'll look you in the eye and say it, you are not a man. You're a pathetic excuse of a wimp.
Somebody on my feed just said, my gosh, this looks like the University of California, Davis.
Yes, we're here
You
at
are
the
correct.
Student Union in Davis, California.
Yes, he used to work here.
Oh, great.
So, doctors who promote circumcision try to claim that it reduces...
If we could just back up a second.
Yeah.
I don't know if I fully addressed your last question. I know you've got this stack of questions. I want to make sure I cover them all, because you wrote up some really good questions.
Thank you.
What was that? What was the question before that I was I talking about a long-term complication, how it's affected the sexual relationship between the man and the woman, and then
We've gone on so many directions.
Yeah. Like you can see, ladies and gentlemen, it's a rabbit hole. When
Yes.
you go down this rabbit hole, the implications and the consequences are devastating and far-reaching.
And some of the questions I'm skipping over because as I read them, I'm like, you've already answered them. So that's
Well, because
great.
they're all tied together,
Yeah,
too.
it's all tied together. Doctors who promote circumcision try to claim that it reduces STDs, viruses such as AIDS or HPV, cancer, and infections. Is there any truth to that? Any of that?
Not only is there no truth to it, it's a blatant lie. It's a blatant lie. American doctors are guilty of a historical crime against the American people. They're going to do the best they can to avoid acknowledging that. So they're covering it up with all these lies of so-called benefits. The European medical community has condemned American doctors for those statements. They do not circumcise boys in European nations, and they have lower rates of all of those diseases and maladies you just referred to. And as far as cancer of the penis goes, that is just absolutely preposterous. That's like 1 in 100,000 men. It's just so rare. I mean, it's, and it has nothing to do with the foreskin. In other words, there are lies in human history, and there are big lies.
Yes.
Circumcision is a big lie.
Huge lie.
And
So-
if you want to see that European condemnation, I post it all the time on my page. Maybe someone will post it in the comments here. I don't want to get it wrong, but the Royal Dutch Medical Association has posted it on their internet page. So if you look up Royal Dutch Medical Association circumcision statement, you should be able to find it that way. It shouldn't take you more than a few seconds to find it. But I'll post that in the comments on this video when I get home.
So many believe that if circumcision were really harmful, wouldn't a lot of men be talking about it?
It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. And it's painful. It's painful and it's embarrassing. American men have been wounded. We've been wounded in the most intimate part of our lives, of our bodies, and it's embarrassing. And we know from the way it goes on Facebook is that if a man does say something about it, there are many people who will leap in and start with the snark and the insults. Oh, well, geez, I'm sorry to hear your sex life is so bad, bro. I mean, it is you have to be a very strong and confident man to speak out against circumcision, and more men are.
Yeah, they are. I've seen it. So you've kind of already touched on this, but I was really surprised to hear that most of the world does not circumcise boys, and that people in Australia and Europe,
True.
They think we're nuts. So who is doing this?
Well, I've been threatened with a ban on Facebook if I mention the chief religion of the Middle East. So I won't even say it here because it's a habit I've gotten into. But it's the chief religion of the Middle East, and it's also prevalent in some parts of Southeast Asia where they circumcise girls and boys. Those nations and the people who believe in that religion are the chief circumcisers in the world. Americans are just a small part of it. Americans are all alone. It's Americans, a few African tribes, and the people of that Middle East religion.
Okay. So you and the Bloodstained Men travel to approximately 60 cities per year.
Yes.
How are you usually received by the public, and are people becoming more receptive to this message?
We actually received very, very well, particularly as the
Great.
years are going by. I'm very interested to see the reaction we're going to get at this year's San Francisco Pride celebration, which is coming up in 3 weeks, because that's a good barometer of public reaction. The first year I marched in Pride, which was, I believe, 2013, when the intactivist contingent walked by, a lot of the people looked away or it was silent, but every year we're getting more cheers. People are applauding and giving us a thumbs up. They're taking our info cards. And Pride is a good barometer of of American youth and the current scene in America. But on the front lines, when we're in any city, USA, we're going to every corner of the United States with this message, and the boo birds are decreasing. We've still got people that yell out their car windows, you people are crazy, and F you, and
of course,
go home, and
there's always trolls.
Don't you have anything better to do, or get a job? And when they say get a job, I always shout back without missing a beat, get a conscience. And that shuts them up fast, although they're speeding off. Most people won't get out of their cars to talk to us in that case. We do get a number of people who are on our side who will get out of their cars, come and say, thank you for doing this. I've been against circumcision for 30 years, 40 years. I've been talking to all my friends for 20 years against circumcision. I didn't circumcise my boys. I have 3 grown sons, all in their 30s, all intact. Or they'll use the word uncircumcised. And ladies and gentlemen, that might seem like a small point, but in the intactivist movement, we use the word intact, not the word uncircumcised, because we don't call ourselves undecapitated.
Right.
Uncircumcised implies that it's always there lurking and waiting for you. We are intact and proud. And that's the future of America.
Do you have any?
So yeah, the public response has been growing every year, and we see it on social media. You've got some of these people pulling out their hair. They're posting on Facebook. Why am I seeing talk about circumcision everywhere? They don't understand what's going on. There is a cultural change taking place right now, ladies and gentlemen. I encourage you to be part of it. Your voice can be just as powerful as anyone's voice. When you post about circumcision on social media, post against it, you will be amazed. And in some cases, you might not see any response. But 2 or 3 years later, someone might write you and say, I want to thank you for that post you made 3 years ago. Because of your post, I kept my son intact. And that's happening a lot.
Right.
I'm getting reports like that and seeing posts like that a lot.
Do you have any stories from the road that stand out that you'd like to share?
Well, the one that comes to mind, because it was one of the earliest, and it was actually very, very humorous. It happened in 1980 when we were protesting in 1980 outside the county courthouse in Eureka, California. And a man came up and was talking to us, and we were telling him that because at that time it was the 2 of us, and we were getting a lot of angry reactions from people, a lot. One guy actually steered his car right at us. We were protesting along the sidewalk. Well, he actually steered his car right at us.
Oh no!
Speeded up. I mean, it looked like I braced myself because it looked like he was coming, and we, at the last moment he veered off. But so this guy got out of it, came up to us in front of the Humboldt County Courthouse, and we were talked to him for probably 10, 15 minutes before what I'm going to describe to you happened. But he said, so people are that angry? I said, yeah. He said, why? And no sooner did he say why than this little Volkswagen Bug went by. You probably all remember they called it a Volkswagen Beetle. And a woman had stuck her fist out of her car window. She was and looking right at me, and she was shaking her fist in fury, and she shouted out as loud as she could, "They should have cut your balls off."
Oh, wow.
And this man that had just asked us, why are people so angry? You want to see somebody laugh their ass off. I mean, he just broke into laughter. He saw exactly what we were talking about. They should have cut your balls off. Like, how dare you protest circumcision?
Right.
Shut up and accept it. No, we're not going to shut up. We're not going to accept it, and we're going to take it down.
Well, one of the funniest pictures I've ever seen from, activism was, I think you were in Texas just not too long ago, where there was an MD who took the picture. You guys snagged it from him somehow, but he was inside the convention center, and all of them during their convention, their view was you guys outside with the signs during the whole thing.
They were like a fishbowl in there. Yeah, they were trapped. I mean, and that's an old convention center. The modern convention centers, like in Chicago, they're building them to insulate the conventioneers from protesters.
Okay.
So like when we were in Chicago last year, we couldn't get up close. But there in Austin last month, we were up close and personal. We were in their face.
That was great.
They were like, we were like people looking into a fishbowl.
Right. That's exactly what it looked like.
And I have a hunch they're not going to bring their conventions back to Austin anytime soon because they're sitting ducks.
Right. I just cracked up when I saw that photo. So people don't realize this goes back to the long-term complications. I saw that one intactivist ended his life because of adult complications with circumcision. And I saw his photo, and he was just so young and incredibly handsome. And I think this tragedy is something people need to be aware of. Once someone is circumcised, it can never be undone. The harm is forever.
It is forever. It is forever. It's a permanent wound to your body and your soul. I healed my soul by changing my name. In 1986, after I first protested in 1980. In 1986, I thought I have to do something. I have to do something about this wound I feel in my soul. And so I changed my name to Brother K in court.
Oh, wow.
And it's now on my passport. It's on my birth certificate, my amended birth certificate, on my driver's license. That's my legal name.
Okay.
And it worked magic for me. Other men are restoring. If you've been left enough skin on your penis, there are certain methods you can use called foreskin restoration. It doesn't make up for what you lost, but the reports are that it's very, very successful for helping men get over some of the damage. But the problem is it takes a lot of patience and a lot of attention to detail and
time and money.
Well, the money's not that great. But if you're interested, ladies and gentlemen, you can look up TLC Tugger on the internet, and that's my friend Ron Lau, RONLOW, and
Okay.
TLC Tugger. Look that up on the internet. I stand behind his integrity and what he's doing, and he can help you out for a few $100s, and there's a forum. But like I said, that takes a lot of diligence and motivation, and the average man does not have it. So the average man will live with the damage, and it creates a bleak choice for men. Do you acknowledge the damage or do you deny it? If you deny it, you can go on your merry way. What they say, ignorance is bliss. But once you know about it, the denial is over.
Right.
And as you mentioned, there have been several suicides that are directly linked to circumcision. We don't know exactly why Jonathan Conte committed suicide. He did not leave a note, but we do know that he committed suicide just a few days after Mother's Day, in which he made a very, very poignant thank you to American moms for protecting their children from this. And we do know that he was estranged from his own parents.
So there's somebody on my feed. He's a former professor here at UC Davis, and he said that he actually lectured on this in his sexuality course here.
Awesome. Thank you,
Yes.
Professor. Thank you.
His name is Daryl Hamamoto.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
So hospital circumcision is not performed as part of a religious ceremony. I was excited to see that many Jewish families are now holding ceremonies where there is an alternative ceremony called a Brit Shalom, I hope I pronounced that correctly, that incorporates the tradition of the naming ceremony without damaging the foreskin.
Yes.
Is this becoming popular?
Yes, it is, and in Israel too.
Oh,
it's a
okay.
very exciting. Actually, I should give a shout out to all our friends in Israel now, because there is a strong and growing intactivist movement in Israel.
Oh, great.
And it's proof of what I always say: parents love their children. When
Yes.
parents find out the truth about circumcision, they don't want their children to suffer. They don't want their children to suffer trauma, long-term damage. And so, yes, the reports I'm getting from Israel are very, very optimistic. I mean, obviously, there's still a tremendous problem there, but we've actually got a Bloodstained Man in Israel. He protests in a bloodstained suit in Tel Aviv. Alon Sivrani is his name. You can find him on Facebook, Sivroni. Alon is his first name, Alon. I believe I spelled his last name correctly. It's an exciting time to be in the intactivist movement because we see change happening every day. Brit Shalom is one of those exciting changes that is taking place. I've shared a number of posts recently with prominent Jewish families in their communities, have posted on Facebook their Brit Shalom. It means a circumcision of peace, or a Brit of peace. No violence, no cutting, no bloodshed. A number of prominent, recently within the last 6 months, I posted a prominent San Francisco family, and these are public posts, so they are not hiding it. And then a prominent, I believe it was a Texas family just in the last few weeks, posted their Brit Shalom. It might have been Florida, but at any rate, Brit Shalom. And there is a website you can find on the internet. It's called Beyond the Bris. Beyond the Bris, B-R-I-S. Bris is essentially the term that religious folk use for circumcision. And many Jewish families are turning away from circumcision. And we met Jewish families in 1980 when we did our work against circumcision that opted out of circumcision for their son. So it's a growing movement among Jewish families, and Jewish men and women are among the leaders and innovators in the intactivist movement. Very, very exciting time to be alive.
Is circumcision today the same as circumcision was in the Bible?
I have seen scholarly research that documents that the circumcision referred to in the Bible was not the total removal of the foreskin, which is practiced now in modern America and introduced several thousand years ago, because Jewish men who had been circumcised ritually, according to the biblical injunction, were stretching their foreskin apparently relatively easily so that they looked intact, so that when they competed in the nude games, I guess in ancient Greece, they looked intact and weren't embarrassed. Well, when the rabbis got wind of this, they put it into that by just cutting off more, and so they issued a rabbinical edict. And again, I don't have those documents. I mean, this is not a major part of my work, but if you do some research, you'll easily find it. So the rabbis got together and decided that, well, we're just going to have to cut off more so they can't hide their circumcision status. And so when Americans adopted the circumcision, which strangely enough appears to be identical to the religious circumcision, they adopted that radical circumcision that removes the entire foreskin all the way below the coronal ridge.
So I've seen some parents ask, if parents decide not to have their son circumcised, won't he be teased?
That to me was never a good argument, and I'll tell you why. Because even if it were true, if I had a son, I had a daughter, but if I had a son, I would not intend to raise a wimp who couldn't take teasing. I would raise a son who would become a proud man someday, who could stand up for his manhood. And boys get teased for anything. Boys will. Every boy, if your dad and mom don't teach you how to take care of yourself, you'll be teased. They'll tease you about something. So that was never a good argument. In today's America, where we are approaching the tipping point of more boys being left intact, we don't really know the numbers. As I speak today, the numbers are collapsing every day. I mean, intactivism is spreading like wildfire, ladies and gentlemen. It is really spreading fast because no parent wants their son to be left out of the change, and the change is happening. It's real. It's now. But that argument about being teased is going out with the garbage, because intact boys are now a sizable proportion of the young men growing up in the United States.
Well, and that's one thing that's so interesting about...
And they're being taught to be proud. Their parents are savvy enough to teach them to be proud and to stand up for themselves.
Right. And that's one thing that's so interesting about you, is because this, in a sense, no longer directly affects you, because like you said, you have a daughter, you did not have a son, and you are still taking the time to go around and save others who, haven't even been born yet, or you're talking to young mothers. I mean, you're talking to everybody because, you protest, but I mean, you could, be hanging out and taking cruises to Bahamas, or, whatever. You could be spending your time doing that, but you spend your time traveling and telling the world about this. So, I mean, I have to applaud you. I have to thank you, because you could easily just be doing something else. You could be watching reruns of The Price is Right all day long, but it's, or whatever, but this is how you choose to spend your time. So,
I couldn't live with my conscience.
Yeah.
I couldn't live with my conscience. And fortunately, I'm retired, and so I can do this.
Right.
I know, ladies and gentlemen, many of you are raising families. You have full-time careers. Do what you can. Don't sacrifice your personal life for this movement, but do what you can and do as much as you can, because it is truly a crisis. It's a crisis in America.
Yes, it is. So is it more complicated to care for the uncircumcised penis?
No. American doctors are teaching parents false care information. They are telling parents, in many cases, American doctors and nurses, and we're even getting reports of nurses doing this to newborn babies. You'll recall earlier I described to you how painful it is when you rip the foreskin away from the head of the penis.
Yes.
The foreskin is fused to the head of the penis at birth, just the way your fingernail is fused to the bed of your finger.
Okay.
The foreskin is fused to the head of the penis. Only slowly do those adhesions break down, and it varies from boy to boy. In some cases, it can happen at under a year old. In other cases, it will happen at 14 or 15 years old. The average age appears to be about 10 years old. It usually happens before puberty. But you never you never pull back a boy's foreskin. There is nothing to clean under. It's a sealed unit. But I just got a report several days ago. One nurse, when babies are born, she automatically yanks back their foreskin and rips it open. And that baby, that is a permanent wound. It can heal, but it can also leave scar tissue. And this injurious care information that American doctors and nurses have been giving to parents has injured hundreds of thousands of boys and led to, voila, the cure, circumcision. So they teach you to pull back the foreskin. The babies suffer terribly from this. When you rip that open, it causes infections, inflammation, and scar damage that can lead to a recommendation of circumcision in the future. And that's what often happens, circumcision. And this is why you see moms posting, well, I've got to get, my little champ circumcised, because, you hear about all these infections. And I had a cousin who kept her son intact, and he had to get circumcised for medical reasons when he was 5. And not 99% of the time, 100% of the time, it's because that parent or a caregiver followed destructive, injurious care information. They ripped back that foreskin, broke open the seal, and introduced bacteria and scarring.
Wow.
And chronic problems. So many American men have grown up with chronic problems, not knowing that was the reason. Many intact American men with chronic problems, and they didn't know that was the reason.
So one thing, I want to ask you to explain how people can find you on social media, and not only that, but you have a schedule online of the cities that you visit, and you invite people. You say, hey, if I'm going to be in your city, come out and protest with us. Yes,
absolutely. Bloodstained Men is working hard to spread the word. You can go on our website, bloodstainedmen.com, bloodstainedmen.org. Okay. We'll redirect you to .com. So either works, bloodstainedmen.org, bloodstainedmen.com. You will see a number of tabs. We have a great webmasters, I should say. We have several of our board of directors who work on it. But they've created a great website and you will see a number of tabs. You will see resources there, which you'll find links to many of the things I've said today. You'll also see upcoming events. You'll see how to print up your own info cards. You can, Bloodstained Men we are a nonprofit. We don't sell anything. We buy our info cards the same way you can. You can buy your info cards from our printer, who doesn't give us a penny for it. We buy them in bulk. We buy them in 20,000 bulk because it's much cheaper to buy them in bulk. But you will see, and you'll also see media. You'll see a media tab on bloodstainedmen.com, and you'll see all the media coverage that our protests have generated. Just dozens and dozens and dozens of TV and radio and newspaper reports over the almost 6 years now that we've been doing this. But you will see the tab for upcoming events on bloodstainedmen.com. And that will link you directly to all the Facebook pages. So you probably have to be on Facebook to see those, because on the website it only gives the city and the time, but not the location. But we have each one of those cities is located there, and all of you are welcome. All of our protests are family friendly. If you've seen what Bloodstained Men does, we have moms come out. They breastfeed their babies out there on the front lines. Generally, there's a shaded grassy area nearby. The children will play, and many of the children, 2, 3, 4, 6 years old, and 10 and 12-year-olds, they get it when they see their parents holding signs. They get it that it's important. They want a sign. They'll grab their own signs, or their moms and dads in many cases. The dads are coming out too. They'll have their own little signs. So you will see upcoming events. I'm going to be flying to Philadelphia about July. I can't remember the exact date. I think it might be July 19. But you'll see it on the website. I don't. We do so many. I don't have the exact dates. It's on my calendar. But we are going. This is going to be our longest tour yet. We're going to be doing 21 cities in 21 days. 21 protests in 21 days. We're going to start off in Wilmington, Delaware. We're going to work our way up the Atlantic seaboard through New York City, the Bronx, Queens. We're going to go up through Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island. We're going to end up in Maine. Then we're going to come back down, and like I said, 21 cities. It's our most ambitious and lengthy protest yet. You please, if you live in the Northeast, check it out. All of you are welcome. We'd love to meet you out there. You can make your own sign, or we have extra signs. Join us on the front lines of the struggle for freedom and human rights in the United States. It's going down, and you can help us bring it down faster.
And people can also donate.
We always need donations, ladies and gentlemen. All of us are volunteers. I live very frugally myself, and I don't earn a penny like all the other volunteers with this, so none of us earn a penny. Your donations only, and thank you for asking that, all your donations go only to pay for our travel costs, which are modest, but like my ticket to Philadelphia round trip is roughly $600. We have to rent out an SUV. We're going to have a 5-person road crew. We need an SUV to carry around our equipment, our luggage, and our 5 people for 3 weeks. So our SUV is costing us over $2,000 just for those. It's costing us close to $3,000.
Wow.
We have gas costs. We have hotel costs. We have to get hotel room for 5 people.
Food.
We have to get food. So yeah. But we've come this far because of your donations. But I always worry about money. I will admit I always worry about money because we're mostly small donations, $5 and $10, $20 donations, and we need a lot of you to do that. And every dollar adds up. So please, if you can spare 5, 10, 20 or more, please go to the donate button on bloodstainedmen.com and donate what you can. And our board of directors will send you a thank you note for that, because your donations have made all of this possible. We would not be on the streets of America protesting from coast to coast without your kind donations. It's the fuel that puts the Bloodstained Men on the front lines of American cities.
Well, thank you so much. And I know everybody's going to love this interview. It's so informative. And is there anything that you wanted to add? Any last statement you wanted to say, or anything that we did not cover?
I think, and thank you, Suzanne. Thank you for driving over from Sacramento to talk to me today. Here, it took us a few weeks to figure out a time when this would work for both of us, and also when this space would be available here on campus. Because this, on some Saturdays, this can be a very, very busy area. But ladies and gentlemen, I have to tell you that I believe our movement in tactivism is the best of the American people. It represents, and worldwide, it's the best of human nature. It brings out the best of human nature. Caring about other people, caring about children, realizing that when we damage children, those become damaged adults, and those damaged adults become part of the fabric of society. And none of us are going to say that we live in a perfect society. We know we don't, and we know there are many problems, and there is none greater than the genital mutilation of children, of American men when they're children in our culture, and none greater in the world than the genital mutilation of children. It does not beget anything good. It begets a host of terrible, terrible things that happen in society. And how we unwind the thread, I don't know, but we don't let something so obvious go on. So it's up to us, the American people, and the people of the world, to stop the genital mutilation of the children. Do what you can, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you for watching.